Welcome to Hoda's Career Info. I am your host, Hoda Kilani, career and academic coach at Right Career Fit. Coaching is all about storytelling, helping you to envision and tell your story your way. I put the series together to share stories of inspiring career people from across the globe. I hope their stories motivate you to envision your career story, discover your road to success, or recast your career path. More importantly, I hope that you love these career stories as much as I do. Our guest today is Professor of Career Guidance at Edinburgh Napier University, Pete Robertson.
A career development practitioner can have a massive impact on somebody's life, and a very positive impact, because that was true for me. Disciplines are like a pair of spectacles, and unless you've tried them all on, you're not going to get a complete view of whatever it is you're looking at. So that's why I'm keen to have multidisciplinary views of careers. If you're not helping to counter inequality, then you become part of the problem. There's a myth that before you start doing something, you should have all the skills and knowledge first. Actually, very often you learn by doing.
Thank you for joining Hoda's Career Info, your program where guests from across the globe share career tips and personal stories to help you successfully navigate your career. Watch, listen, and learn. Remember to like, subscribe, share, and follow me, Hoda Kilani, on social media for more career info. More importantly, make sure you have that very important career conversation with a career professional. After studying psychology at the University of Warwick, guest Pete Robertson trained as a career advisor in 1987. He worked in schools in the UK, specializing in support for young people with disabilities and learning difficulties. He then trained in occupational psychology at the University of East London, becoming a career service training manager. His research interests include the relationship between careers and well-being, theory and policy in relation to career guidance, and support for disadvantaged groups. He is a fellow of the National Institute for Career Education and Counseling. He is also currently the president of the Career Development Institute, the UK professional body for career practitioners. Join me to learn from Professor Pete's experience as he talks about career well-being, career development as a learning phenomenon, and so much more. Welcome, Pete Robertson, to Hoda's Career Info. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Well, thank you for having me. It's a real pleasure to be with you today.
I appreciate your time, and right away I'll start with the first question. What is the one term that best describes the work that you do, and how would you define it?
Okay, well, the term I'm going to go for is well-being, and the reason I've picked well-being is because for me it's been a rich theme to explore the connections between well-being and career development. When I did my PhD, I was looking at the well-being outcomes of career guidance with unemployed adults, and subsequently I've written a number of papers exploring the connection, both from the point of view of disadvantaged groups and from the point of view of even thinking of career development interventions in terms of public health, how if provided at a large scale to a whole population, they can make a small but important contribution to public mental health. So I've found it a very interesting kind of theme running through my research career, at least. And I kind of feel that career development, I think practitioners know that career development supports people's well-being and can help us to combat anxiety and depression. I think people on the front line instinctively know that they can send their clients away with a spring in their step. And I kind of believe career development helps people have a sense of agency, a feeling of control over their lives, a feeling of connection to their community, and it helps them to find work or study opportunities that give them a sense of purpose in life. So I kind of feel that there's strong reasons to connect career development to well-being, and it's also enabled me to move on from that in a way to look at the wider. We tend to think of career development as having educational impacts and economic impacts, but I've been interested in looking at wider social impacts of career development, and that's led me on to seeing the connection to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So for me, it opens up a lot of doors, and I suppose that's why I've chosen that tag, if you like, for this conversation. In terms of definitions of well-being, and that's a bit tricky. I think often people talk in terms of health and well-being in one breath. And health is much more than the absence of disease. And in fact, you can have a positive life. Illness is part of life, really. It's part of the human experience. So you can have a positive life even while managing an illness. So you can't see it solely in those terms. And I don't think you can see it solely in terms of happiness. I'm a little skeptical of people who promise career happiness through their advice. I think that happiness is a fleeting emotion. And so I don't think we can think solely in terms of happiness, or at least not exclusively. But I think we can think in terms of well-being, in terms of a sense of purpose, finding work meaningful, finding work engaging and absorbing, and doing things that are aligned with your values. I guess well-being for me is about the good life, and the good life is being able to focus on what's important to you, and that might be very different for different people.
I appreciate you taking on defining it, because I don't want it to be from your perspective. What I find interesting is that you just said well-being and not career well-being. So to you personally, is there a difference between the two?
I think I would see career well-being as a subset of well-being in general. So well-being would cut across different domains of our life, our personal and domestic lives, as well as our working and public lives. So I think career well-being is a major component of well-being in general, but it's not the whole story, obviously.
Thank you so much for clarifying this distinction. And I'm going to move on right away to the next question, which is about you and your story, your journey so far, if possible, and if you can, embed with it a lesson or two that you've learned throughout this journey.
Sure. Well, I'll start at school, if that's okay. I think like a lot of young people, teenagers and young adults, I struggled quite a lot to find a sense of direction. My parents had health problems or challenges related to health problems, so there was a limit to how much they were able to help me at that stage. And I was very torn between sciences and humanities. I seemed to have a foot in both camps and didn't really know which way to go. Now, the person who really helped me at that stage was the careers advisor, the career development practitioner in the school I attended in South London. And he was a Sri Lankan guy, and I found him very supportive. And eventually, through his guidance, I chose to do a psychology degree. Subsequently, I found that psychology, and in fact, the whole social science area, is one that I do fit into, somewhere between the sciences and the humanities, perhaps. So that became a sort of comfortable academic or study home for me. And at several stages in my life as a young adult, I went back to this same careers advisor when I left university and a couple of years subsequently. And he ended up having quite a big impact on my life, and subsequently led to me choosing to train in career development, which I did in Bristol. So I guess the message for me is just to be aware that a career development practitioner can have a massive impact on somebody's life, and a very positive impact, because that was true for me. Sometimes some of our students join our program to train in this field and say, well, I had terrible advice, I could do better. But that certainly wasn't my experience. I had a very supportive practitioner who helped me when I was confused. And sometimes I think career development practitioners are really the only people in your life who sit you down on your own and listen to you and help to give you a sense of direction. So for me, that was very, very impactful.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing the story. I've interviewed over 100 guests. You are the first person to highlight that career development counselor helped you in school. So thank you for sharing this story, because there are so many of us out there trying to do the best we can to support students. I appreciate this message and your story. I'm going to move on to an article you wrote. I know you've written a lot. It was an article you published with Rosie Alexander, special issue, disciplinary perspective in career development. You highlighted that career studies is necessarily an interdisciplinary field. Can you please share with the audience, what do you mean by this?
Yeah, okay. So just a bit of background. This was a special issue of the Journal of the National Institute for Career Education and Counselling. And the reason I want to get the name of the journal in there is that it's free. It's an open access journal, so anyone anywhere in the world can log on and get this issue, or any issue of the Journal of the National Institute for Career Education and Counselling. I've just stepped down as the chief editor, and together with Rosie Alexander, we did a special issue around disciplinary perspectives. I guess the way I see it is you could look at career development through a variety of lenses, different spectacles, if you like. And the dominant one has been psychology, and that's fine. That's good. I'm trained as a psychologist. I'm happy about that. But psychology has been particularly dominant in North America, not exclusively, also quite big in a number of other countries and a number of other continents as well. So I'm cool about psychology being in there, but I think the problem is when that becomes the only discipline, that really can narrow our view of career development as a phenomenon. And it's important to have other perspectives. And Europe, or at least some parts of Europe, you do get some other perspectives that are important. Sociology is one. We get some really good input from sociologists on career matters sometimes. Education is a big one, particularly I think in the UK. Educational perspectives on career development have been influential. And in more recent years, probably since the turn of the millennium, policy studies has become big, because a lot of career development's run by governments. So what governments choose to do and what they think about careers and how it fits into education and employment policies become a big deal. So those are fairly well established, but I think that there's other perspectives that don't get enough airtime. And there's a number we tried to showcase in that special issue. Rosie Alexander's work is an excellent example. She writes about geographical perspectives on career development. It makes a big difference where you are. She's written about rural and island communities in Scotland and elsewhere, and how where you live makes a massive difference to what you end up doing. And even for me, coming from London, that was true. One of the first jobs I did as a student were temping in offices in London, and London was the administrative centre of an empire at one stage. So there's an awful lot of offices there, and you end up doing what's available. So geographical perspectives are important. But also we try to bring in media studies perspectives, career in the popular media, historical perspectives, and a couple that particularly interest me, and that's philosophical and economic perspectives. I think tend to get neglected when they've got a lot to say about how people should live their lives and how those lives fit into the wider economy. So For me, I guess disciplines are like a pair of spectacles, and unless you've tried them all on, you're not going to get a complete view of whatever it is you're looking at. So that's why I'm keen to have multidisciplinary views of career so that we don't miss something important.
I love the article and I love what you're saying. What I would like you to focus on, if possible, because that's of interest to me and the young people I work with, is how does career development and education fit together as two disciplines?
Okay. Yeah, well, a lot of careers work goes on in educational institutions. So to some extent, you have to understand how it fits into a wider context, both a curriculum context and a context of schools, colleges, and universities as institutions. So an educational perspective can help you with that. But more than that, it really helps you to focus on career development as a learning phenomenon. You can think of careers work as matching, you can think of it as problem solving. There's lots of different ways you can think about it, but thinking of it as learning is a really useful way of approaching it. So educational perspectives are useful not just for thinking about how do we work with a class full of school pupils or college students. It's also useful for one-to-ones because you're thinking about, well, what will my client have learned that they can go away and implement in their lives? So I think it helps you to focus on the learning career as a learning phenomenon, which is pretty useful in a lot of settings.
I appreciate you taking on this question. Thank you so much, Peter. The next question is still also about career practitioners. And from your perspective, what is the most important aspect that career practitioners need to worry about when supporting their clients to career success? I think with your well-being term in mind.
Okay, yeah, I'll try and link it to well-being. For me, I think the thing that practitioners should worry about the most is inequality. I think it's such a massive issue, really so big it's almost scary and daunting, I think, for practitioners. So social and economic inequality is a massive issue. In the middle of the 20th century, it wasn't so bad, but it's in the last 20, 30 years, inequality has been growing enormously in a lot of nations, certainly in USA and in the UK, for example. It's become a major concern and elsewhere as well. It's really difficult for career development practitioners to respond to because it feels like such a big picture issue. I think if practitioners aren't part of the solution, if they aren't seeking to combat inequality, then they're potentially part of the problem because they are reinforcing existing structures that privilege rich and well-educated groups. And I think this is something we need to be very careful of and mindful of in any setting that we're working in. We want to do the best for whoever's in front of us, whoever comes to see us seeking support, of course, and we should do that. But it does mean that we need to make extra efforts to reach out to groups who may not understand the benefit of career development help, who may not seek it out themselves, that we help to bring them in to receive our services, and that we make extra efforts to adapt our services to meet their needs. For me, that's something that all practitioners should be worrying about, even though it does feel challenging and daunting.
That's wonderful. I appreciate that you highlighted it.
You asked me to link it to well-being, and I think I should say that health inequality is a big issue as well. That people from wealthy backgrounds live longer and have more years of life free of illness than those from disadvantaged and poor backgrounds. And one of the big things that makes a difference is people's working lives. The nature of those working lives. If you have a secure income in a decent job, in an environment where there's reasonable health and safety, that's much better for your health than being in precarious work, in being anxious about paying the rent, in an unhealthy or psychologically threatening environment. So there's a huge link between health inequality, health and well-being, and socio-economic gradients. So that's an important thing to point to as well.
For sure. And again, this is not just in one country, this is probably across the world.
Exactly.
I do have one more question for you, Peter, and that's about the stretch zone and getting out of our comfort zone. I work with young people, always telling them that they need to be in that zone once in a while. Do you have any projects or any great ideas that you are working on right now that you'd like to share with us?
Sure. Well, I think it's good advice you're giving to people. I think I like a challenge, and it's good to be out of your comfort zone. I think there's a myth that before you start doing something, you should have all the skills and knowledge first. Actually, very often you learn by doing. So I think that's great advice you're giving to people. For me, I'm always at my best when I'm slightly outside my comfort zone. I think one thing I'm going to try and do this year is write a book, or at least write a book on my own, which I've not done before. And what I'm going to look at is, in a way, this builds on my interest in well-being. What I'm going to do is write a book exploring the connection between freedom and careers, the concept of freedom, being free to pursue a life where you are working on things that you value, things that matter to you. So exploring the connections, the political, social, and economic connections between freedom and career. For me, that's going to be challenging because there's lots of different aspects to it. You need a multidisciplinary perspective. So I'm going to push myself a little bit to try and connect together lots of ideas that I feel could add up to something interesting. So that's going to be a theory perspective on careers. And the real challenge in it's going to be making it relevant to practitioners. But hopefully the idea of freedom will resonate with some people out there.
This is definitely a unique perspective, and I'm glad that you're thinking of practitioners as you're thinking of developing this theory and putting it together. Thank you for sharing it here. I've had 2 people share that they want to write books, and they actually 2 or 3 years later came back and they said they did. So we'll be looking out for you.
I've said it now, so I've got to do it.
Yes, absolutely. We're committing you on this program to it.
Yeah.
These were all the questions I had prepared for you today, Peter. Was there anything else you wanted to add or say before we wrap up the episode?
No, I don't think so. That's thanks very much for having me. And just to say that since I've discovered your YouTube channel, I've realized there's an awful lot of material there that I'm going to have to explore. So there's going to be many hours for me catching up with some of your interviews. So thanks for putting them out there.
Thank you so much for saying that. I appreciate your thoughts on this and your feedback. I would love to hear your feedback too after you've watched them. Let me know what I can fix. Thank you so much, Pete, for your time.
Great. Thank you. Thanks very much. Bye-bye for now.
This is it for Hoda's Career Info, the program where career professionals from across the globe join me to inspire you to succeed. Our guest today on Hoda's Career Info was Pete Robertson. You can connect with Pete on LinkedIn. In this episode, Professor Pete shares that there is a myth that before you start doing something, you should have all the skills and knowledge first. He adds, actually, very often you learn by doing. Do you agree with Professor Pete? Have you ever taken on something without having all the required skills and knowledge? Comment and share your thoughts and experiences. Remember that you can watch Hoda's Career Info on YouTube or listen to the episode on your favorite podcast app. To let me know if you're interested in an opportunity to talk about your work, you can send me a direct message on my website, rightcareerfit.com, where you can also sign up for my newsletter to stay up to date on the latest episodes. Please like, subscribe, share, and follow me on social media, and together let's increase career info. I am your host, Hoda. Until next time, take the time to pause, reflect, and celebrate what you have achieved.